Hello everyone, it's Black Shadow here, and welcome back to more for Denon's Design Diaries. I hope you're all keeping well. Quick apologies at the start of this video if I do sound a little bit hoarse or anything. I'm sorry about that. It's been a pretty wild few days here at Black Shadow Studios. However, fingers crossed and touch wood and all that good stuff. In a couple of weeks or so, I should be finally moving to my own place. I've been having to rent rooms for the past couple of years. Been a lot of fluid situations, especially the past couple of months have been completely mental, but everything going well. In a couple of weeks I'll have my keys to my own place, so looking forward to that very much, and very much hoping that I'm not jinxing myself by saying it in this video. We hope. Anyways, let's talk about Sardukar Commanders. So when this diary came out here, this came out like a day or so after I released the video for the first one, and at first I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, come on, Paul, look here. You've just had your first diary down here, you know, talking about Bloodlines, introducing, now you're getting this one, like, come on, you're getting out of line here. You're not even giving me any indications it's coming. I'd like some notice, that'd be great. But this hasn't actually been done by Paul Denon. It's been done by a guy called Caleb Vance, which is a name you might recognize, potentially. He's one of the designers that was noted by Paul in the first diary. One of, I believe, 3 different names that he's been working alongside to kind of come up with the mechanics and systems that Bloodlines is going to be looking to introduce for Dune Imperium Uprising. And that does bring us to Sardukar Commanders, which is the mechanic that a lot of us knew about, but we didn't actually know anything about how it was actually going to work and what the implementation was going to be. Quite interesting read this, actually. There's a link of this in the video description below if you want to go have a look yourself. As usual, I'll kind of breeze through some of the text fairly quickly here, but yeah, I've got through here. During Imperium Uprising, we got to experience the fun of mighty sandworms storming directly into the conflict of Arrakis for the first time. When we started designing Bloodlines, we started with 2 main goals we want to accomplish: to create more diversity for the battles being waged, while making sure this new element was also able to create a fresh experience for the base game Dune Imperium. So this is a very tricky balancing act, and this is something that Direwolf has been having to kind of like find the line between ever since Uprising existed, because now when you had just Dune Imperium and you had Dune designing obviously for Rise of Ix and Immortality, you had one thing that you were working for, you know, and you could tailor the experience specifically to that. But now you've got Dune Imperium and you've got Uprising, which are not the same thing. While their base mechanics, of course, are very similar, the actual kind of more detailed side of it is very, very different. In regards to, obviously, Uprising is very much, is more battle-focused. Rewards from battles are far more stronger than they used to be in base Dune Imperium. And, of course, you've got new layers and systems and a totally redesigned board as well. So trying to find stuff that works for both is an unenviable task, and is one that I don't get paid enough to make those sort of comments. Look at it that way. Better them than me. So they had to design decided to design a new combat unit. And the idea apparently took many forms. One experiment was that a unit destroyed enemies when it was entered into the conflict, with the caveat that it had to be deployed wherever possible. This is not entirely new. There is a card back in Rise of Ix called it's Desert Ambush, I believe. It was like a triangle access card. And any units that you sent into combat, you could then push other units out of the combat of your choice. It was quite a niche card. It definitely found a bit more use in Immortality with Rise of Ix when grafting became a thing, because then you could suddenly then graft this card to a lot more spaces rather than just the desert tiles. And you could do some really, really cool stuff with that. However, only it was deemed to be too punishing and left players feeling too bad when their forces were decimated. Because this is talking about not just retreating, just outright killing dudes, you know. Pretty brutal. We experimented with other combat add-ons and was subtly incentivizing other strategies, but most of the mechanics ended in similar ways, either being too devastating or too niche to use well. This is far from the only board game or video game or any kind of game that has had this issue. You've got to find something that is interesting. You got to find it's got to be useful and applicable enough situations, but it's not got to then completely overly dominate what's already there, which is very, very easy to do and just kind of over tailor stuff. So very, very tricky stuff there, and I can understand that. The team would eventually come on to what we now know as the Sardukar Commanders. Early version of the combat unit was fun to pursue and acts as a strong alternative to worms, requiring a different path for taking turns that required off-world sub and recruitment, which is not a million miles away when you think of like the 6-player game. You've got the additional faction spaces, so it's kind of a bit like that, I guess. Thematically, we decided to explore the strength of the Emperor's Sardukar and help bring it to life. So if you're not aware of what Sardukar Commanders actually are, they are special troops. When you start a game with Bloodlines, there are, I think, 7 commanders in the box, and there are 5 of them that are put in various space on the board. 2 on the Emperor, 1 on Deliver Supplies, I think High Council, and he wants to say Gather Supports is the 5th spot? I can't quite recall. But regardless, they are 2 strength like any other troop. When you go to a space with a commander that's available, you can pay 2 Solari to recruit him, and he'll go into your garrison. Anytime you get hold of a commander, you can get hold of one of these tiles. There's a variety of these that will be available to you. There'll be like 4 face-up out of a pile of about 14. And they have a variety of different abilities. Some will give you extra strength in combat. Some will give you reveal effects. Some have more conditional stuff going on. There's a whole variety of things. And whenever your command unit is involved in a battle, you get all the effects of the commanders all built up. So if you've gotten 2 commanders, you get 2 picks of tiles. Sometimes you'll be able to get hold of extra tiles in the first place. There are different things and other Imperium cards that will affect that. But that's how they basically work. Once you use them, you kind of keep them, but they're spent, and you've got to spend another 2 Solari to re-recruit them back into your garrison. So pretty pricey. You've definitely got to make the best use of them, because money can be very hard to come across. But it's also a nice way of kind of dealing with situations. I remember finding a few times Uprising where you could just end up with just buckets of money and have absolutely nothing to do with it. So I am totally all for this improvement. Now, when I first learnt about what the commanders were actually going to be, I thought they were kind of neat. In the upcoming, or possibly released at this point, Spy Satellites podcast with myself and CJ, talking about all these mechanics, we did obviously touch upon the commanders. And I kind of settled on kind of neat, very cool, but I don't know if you could really build a full game around them, especially in Uprising, where worms are still so powerful and seem to be really the main driving force of trying to snowball your game. It's one of those ones that's like very similar to Dreadnoughts in Rise of X when it first came out, especially in competitively. Very few people use Dreadnoughts, if any at all, but gradually people got a little bit more in tune with them, and now you do see them propping up from time to time. I think there is probably more to be said, though, for the commanders, probably, especially in a bit of practice. Here's the commanders, by the way. Yeah, the board spaces. So the different Emperors, Spacing Guild, and the Landsrad board spaces. When you visit, spend 2 Solari to get, and when it's lost in battle, returns to your supply, and you can pay 2 in a future Solari to recruit it again. Makes total logical sense. So the commanders can be used with both the base game as well as with Uprising. They definitely do have some very differing effects, actually, as it mentions here, because if you're running with the commanders in the base game, obviously in Uprising you got Dutiful Service, but in the base game it's Wealth, and Wealth gives you 2 Solari, which is enough to buy a commander. So you can actually go get a commander first up immediately in base game, get yourself like one of these extra tiles to get some extra resources, bits and pieces like that. That's actually not that bad. It also makes Conspire. I know some people are still very finicky about Conspire, even though I'm like the world's greatest advocate of it. But now you could think, well, if you're getting 4 spice, you're getting 3 Solari, 2 troops, a commander, and an infantry. That sounds actually pretty darn good, and I imagine that could be quite popular. But obviously, it's available for both types of the game. Having the commander as well on the fold space specifically, I think it'd be pretty funky. Unless you just go into fold space anyways, obviously for shipping and such. If you're playing Rise of X is great, but people forget like fold space cards are pretty damn awesome and give you that really nice chunk of flexibility. So really strong. The commanders are formidable and bound, providing extra strength and other benefits at the cost of Solari. If you acquire multiple commanders, all of their skills do stack together. So you can, if you hire 3 commanders, you get 3 picks of tiles, and you only ever need 1 commander in the battle for every tile to be active. Obviously, if you've got more of them, you do get the extra strength, but you don't get like double of the tiles or anything like that. Think of it like with Uprising with worms. As long as you've got one worm in combat, you get double battle rewards, but obviously if you've got multiple worms, you still get the strength of them all combined at least. So there are some pretty fun abilities here. And then we start getting into the really funky stuff, talking about the Imperium deck, and one Amber Matuli. So when I first read this, and I imagine a few of you guys have read this as well, let's get to this. You can also build your commanders to take advantage of retreating opportunities. Many Sardukar skills give you something during your reveal turn, and some cards even give you a bonus for having commanders in the conflict, as you can see here. But of course, once you've done your reveal turn, you don't actually need to have the commander in the battle anymore, because you've already taken the stuff that it would have given you. So what you have is a situation where if you're able to deploy a commander, get your resources, your troops, your persuasion, whatever it is of your deck, and then you retreat him back to your garrison, well, you're saving yourself 2 slurry because he's not going to die. Means you can deploy him again to get your bits and pieces going, and you can have lots of potential profit. And yeah, really funky that. So for example, you could gain a spice from Driven, which is this one here, and 2 persuasion from Quash Rebellion during your reveal turn before retreating the commander with Amber Matuli's Scout's ability. The so-called Matuli Shuffle. Is it possible that we have finally found the meta for Amber? It only took an expansion. Of course, she has been, I don't want to say derided, I don't think that's a really fair term, but she's not very much used in competitive play. She's pretty basic, and her retreat ability is like kind of novel, but it's not usually that really useful, truth be told. But now that we're kind of going down this route of things, maybe Bloodlines the expansion for her, you know? Maybe this is it's a bit like with Elazari Kaz. She came out with the Rise of Ix expansion, although I don't think she's that great at it, honestly. But once Immortality came out and she had access to grafting cards, man, she could be on just a completely different other level and just like really powerful and strong because of the way that grafting works. So this is kind of like that variant of that. And hey, I'm all for this. You know, you've got leaders here and you've got leaders here, and I'm totally fine taking them and pushing them up there, quite frankly. It's the best thing for it. Means you got to get a $40 expansion to do it, then so be it, but I think well worth the time and effort. So I am much looking forward to upcoming Uprising Bloodline tournaments where we have Amber Matuli absolutely dominating every game that's ever been conceived. It will make for some good content. Now, there is one other facet to this that is well worth noting, and I think that this has been long overdue, and that is talking about the Emperor himself and the Emperor faction. Ever since day 1 of Dune Imperium, we've had our 4 factions: the Fremen, Bene Gesserit, Spacing Guild, and the Emperor. And basically, ever since Rise of Ix came out, the Emperor has been pretty much bottom of the list of importance. The Fremen, you're going for your water supplies and obviously combat opportunities. I'm talking a lot more base game here. The Bene Gesserit is usually for, you know, obviously getting intrigues to mess with your opponents, for, you know, drawing cards to get better reveals, and obviously now for spies, that sort of thing. And then the Spacing Guild has been for that early kind of surging into, obviously shipping, but then later on, obviously being able to get hold of those fold space cards for flexible deployment later on. And now in the Uprising game, obviously it gives access to your water instead, so it kind of lets you get along that train in a kind of different way. In the midst of all that, though, the Emperor, unfortunately, has kind of lacked a little bit, really. In base game, the Emperor was your money generator outside of going shipping or like sell melange. But usually it was not a place people really wanted to hit unless you were kind of going for like Wealth Menta, if you're playing Zilban, something like that. Typically speaking, unless there were cards out like Firm Grip or maybe like Talaxi Surge or something later on, if you're first to get the Emperor Alliance, it's pretty much safe. Very rarely do people come after you heavily because it's just the spaces themselves aren't that great. And clearly there's been a focus in Bloodlines to turn that. And you know what? I've got no issue with that at all. First of all, obviously you've got the commands on both the spaces. Makes logical sense. However, they wanted to challenge players' faction priorities, adding some incentive to Emperor spaces. There are now various cards in Bloodlines that reward you for befriending the Emperor, and Sardukar Commanders is obviously available, can be acquired at both the board spaces, which is a well-placed physics setup for your future combat turns. You can acquire commanders with the Loyal skill, which rewards you for high Emperor influence, and there is even an Emperor card that allows you to gain a Sardukar Commander when trashed, which is pretty wild. There are 2 commanders that are kind of kept off board, and this is what they're for specifically, so you can gain commanders this way. Also, by the way, just revealing for 2 persuasion a troop. That's pretty good. I like that. Command set here as well, like 1 persuasion, retreat 2 troops to 2 more. Like that, a lot of good stuff. That's going to really mess with your opponents. That's some nice stuff there. So, yeah, totally up with that. I think it's about time the Emperor's had a little bit of love. Anything that gives people conspiring more makes for a better game as far as I am concerned. So, really happy to see that. Sardukar Commander skills you acquire each game will greatly fit your strategy, letting you build your own pathway to a strong combat force. We choose to acquire skills that give you conditional strength, extra resources, some combination of both. We hope you enjoy finding new lines of strategy for your games of Imperium Uprising with the Sardukar Commanders. Thank you, Mr. Caleb Vance. So, yeah, I think a lot of promising stuff here. Again, I say, kind of giving the Emperor a bit of a buff has been kind of long overdue. And I would actually say, like, playing with some of these cards, this is a personal anecdote here, so don't take what I'm about to say with, like, full authority. This is just kind of the way I see it. When Uprising came out, the very first time, when I first got all of it, and we talked about this in the review we did on the channel, obviously, with CJ. Uprising is a really good game. It's very well put together. It can be a bit cutthroat at times, but it's kind of like, I've always viewed it as more the competitive man's Dune Imperium compared to the base game. But honestly speaking, I've never quite gravitated towards it as much as the base game, and I don't know why. I've never quite been able to put a finger on it. Is it because I'm kind of lukewarm on worms and how they work and doubling rewards, and it feels really hard to win games without worms? That probably has something to do with it. There are ways to make that happen, but just in base Dune Uprising a lot of the time, that kind of hasn't really happened a whole lot, and I have been wanting something to really kind of diversify the situation. That's why Rise of Ix was so great for Dune Imperium base, is that it diversified the game. It meant that you had alternative ways of kind of picking up points. It gave you more ways to fight for factions. The end game text and stuff like that. I know at times with the immortality, that maybe can get a little bit much at times, but that's a different conversation. But it just gave you different ways to approach the game and kind of address things. And I think that was great. Immortality also had its effects on that as well. Uprising, at the start of the game, it's a race for worms, and then it's whoever gets the worms first has to try and snowball them, and if they snowball, they probably win. And if you don't win around 7 or 8 conflict, it's very hard to win a game of Uprising. So any way that lets you kind of do that without having to go down the worm route, I think is good, and I think it's going to be healthy for the game. Obviously, we've talked about the leaders as well. I think some of them are going to be really funky. There is some wild stuff going on leader-wise, but stuff like Liet Kynes, I think is absolutely good for the game. It just helps kind of diversify the situation and just make it... The more variety you've got, the better, frankly. It means that if you just kind of enjoy the game casually, you have lots of different kind of experiences, the leaders you're playing as, you feel special. But on the competitive side, it means only more stuff you've got to learn. You've got to be a bit more kind of reacting to the situations rather than knowing what's going to come down the line. And I think that's going to be pretty much good as well. So looking forward to more of these diaries. Again, looking really promising for the commanders. And as and when they come out, I'll be covering them as best as I can, assuming that I have an internet connection where I'm going to be when it's released. Please, Paul, don't release anything in 2 weeks. Please. just hold off. Just hold off for a few days. I really appreciate that. Anyways, I need to get going. So thank you much for watching and listening. We'll have more from the diary as it comes out, and of course more for Bloodlines when we know more. If the Spice Highlights podcast isn't out on the channel yet with me and CJ, then it will be out imminently. Fingers crossed for that. Take care of yourselves. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.